Hi, I'm Daphne Richards, and this is Augie. Our question this week is about wildflowers. As you've noticed, our native population is a bit sparse this year. And as you've learned from the news interviews with our local experts, the reason is our lack of fall and winter rain. Spring flowering wildflowers release their seeds in summer. Then, ideally, those seeds sprout with the onset of rain in the fall. But when we don't get any rain in the fall, the seeds are still there in the soil and will wait for better conditions before they sprout. In fact, bluebonnets have such a hard seed coat, which doesn't break down easily, so that ensures that the seed only germinates when the environment is most likely to be ideal for the new seedling. As we talked about earlier this year regarding bluebonnets, if you have wildflowers in your landscape, you're subject to the same rules of nature, but you're also more able to manipulate your environment. So if your wildflowers are a bit sparse this year, you'll need to remember to watch the weather next fall and winter and water if we aren't getting any rain. If you want to plant any new wildflowers, remember the time to scatter that seed is late summer and into early fall, not the spring right now. But it's not too late to plant transplants of coreopsis, blanket flower, columbine, and blackfoot daisy, and other wildflowers you might find in your nurseries now. If you don't have a spot for them, try some in containers. Just be sure to use a well-drained, porous potting mix and not too large of a pot. Our wildflowers traditionally grow in shallow, even rocky soils, so they'll not thrive in very deep containers full of rich soil. If you don't plant in taller containers, just be sure not to overwater, since the soil below the root zone will stay wet and it will encourage rot. Our plant this week would be great in any wildflower garden, but also looks fabulous in more structured beds. Engelmann's daisy, Engelmannia peristania. This delicate-looking little Central Texas native is actually quite tough. It will bloom its little head off with very little supplemental irrigation, even through the driest of times. Although, in the intense heat and bright sun of a typical Central Texas summer, the leaves and blooms do fold in on themselves and look a little bit wilted. But this is just a protective measure for the plant to shade itself a little bit. Engelmann's daisy can be found in both the Edwards Plateau and the Blackland Prairie regions of Central Texas, so it tolerates a wide variety of soil types. But if you have heavy clay soil and you overwater or we get a lot of rain, this plant will struggle and may not survive. Engelmann's daisy stays pretty small, only getting about 2 feet tall and wide. It needs to be planted in the full sun, so avoid areas under trees or other larger plants. Engelmann's daisy will be covered in blooms from spring through summer, then will slow down a bit. But if you're industrious enough to give it a little haircut in late summer, it will bloom again quite nicely through the fall. Since there will be so many spent flowers, it will be virtually impossible to actually deadhead this plant, so simply shear it back all around, the way you might if you were shaping a much larger shrub. Bunnies and deer just love the taste of Engelmann's daisy, so these plants may not last long if you regularly have hungry visitors to your garden. To do in your garden this week, if your summer vegetables survived the late March freeze that many of us saw recently, it's time to fertilize them. But if you had to replant and the transplants have only been back in the ground a few weeks, wait until the plants get a little larger before you fertilize them. Summer vegetables need a little extra nutrition to produce and provide us with a harvest all summer long. And I'd like to remind you about AgriLife Extension's Gardening Hotline service. If you have a gardening question, just call us. We have well-trained master gardeners who volunteer to answer your calls. You can also bring by a plant sample if you'd like for us to look at something. Just be sure to call first and make sure that a master gardener will be there when you stop by. We'd love to hear from you, so please visit klru.org/ctg to send us your questions or plants of the week from your garden.